Hi, this is Josh Blackman. I am the president of the Harlan Institute, and it's my honor to introduce the next match in the Harlan Institute-ConSource Virtual Supreme Court Competition for 2017. We will be covering today the case of Trinity Lutheran Church versus Pauley. And we are joined today by myself, my colleague from ConSource, Julie Silverbrook, and two teams from Lake Oswego High School in Oregon. We will have SaraJane Griffiths and Siobhán Nolan. We'll have Reily-Simmons and Tyanin Opdahl. Each team will have 20 minutes total, 15 minutes first, and then 5 minutes of rebuttal time to make their arguments. And the winner of this tournament will advance on to the championship round next month. Julie, any questions or comments before we get started?
Nope, I just want to wish, again, both teams the very best of luck, and thanks everyone for tuning into the competition.
Very good.
And with that, I'll let our teams go ahead and get started.
So I will start the countdown, 15 minutes for petitioners. Ms. Nolan and Mrs. Griffiths, you may begin whenever you're ready.
Thank you. May it please the court that I, SaraJane Griffiths,
and I, Siobhán Nolan,
stand to represent the petitioner in the case here presented before the court, Trinity Lutheran Church v. Pauley, answering the question of, is it a violation of the Establishment Clause to give a grant of recycled scrap tire material to a playground associated with the church in violation of the Establishment Clause?
Ultimately, we do not only see that this is not a violation of the Establishment Clause, but furthermore, the denial of the scrap tire material grant is going to be a violation of the Equal Protection Clause under the 14th Amendment, as well as the Free Exercise Clause of the 1st.
In 2012, the Learning Center, an established nonprofit associated with Trinity Lutheran Church in Missouri, was denied a grant by the Missouri Department of Natural Resources for recycled scrap tire material off the sole basis of their religion. In fact, when judged purely on secular criteria, Trinity Lutheran Church was ranked 5th out of 44 applicants, showing that they would have received the grant but for their religious affiliation.
Through the Lemon test established in the case Lemon v. Kurtzman, we see that this fulfills all three prongs to establish whether something violates or does not violate the Establishment Clause. The first prong, being a secular purpose, is fulfilled through the acknowledgement that when they went through the process of being ranked under all secular materials and understandings, they ranked 5th out of 44. Additionally, this grant is only for the use of creating a new surfacing material for the playground. The second prong, that this does not enhance or inhibit the religion in its primary or principal effect. It's clearly demonstrating the fact that this is only for playgrounds, and this playground does not enhance the religion, nor does it inhibit anyone else's or their own.
Counselor, let me ask you about that. Tell me how giving the grant to service the playground doesn't enhance the religious mission of the schools. Explain that to me a little bit.
Thank you, Justice Silverberg. What we see is that actually with giving the grant to the Learning Center, which is an established nonprofit organization, it's open to both the children of the school itself and to the surrounding community. And so since we're looking at the playground itself, and it doesn't change the quality or content of the playground, but simply makes it safer for a secular purpose, we believe as a petitioners that it does not advance the religion, because quite frankly, when we look at making a playground safer, that won't convert families to Lutheranism.
Well,
No, go ahead.
Justice Silverbrook. If I may, you mentioned that this won't attract people to Lutheranism. If I have a child and I'm in the city and I'm considering one daycare over another has these rubber chips and the other one lacks these rubber chips, I don't want my kid to crack a skull. Send my kid to the Lutheran Church. Isn't this program bestowing a benefit on a religious organization? And once the kid's in the program, he'll be exposed to religious instruction, to prayer and other things. Why isn't this a conferred benefit?
Well, that's, thank you for your question. That's addressed in the fact that that would not be a primary or principal result of the playgrounds. That would be more of a secondary, tertiary event. So that would still not result in failing the Lemon test.
And furthermore, it's not aiding the institution in and of itself. It's aiding the families whose children attend the school, and it helps the families whose kids are playing on the playgrounds after school hours.
Okay. You can
You
proceed with
proceed.
your argument.
And our third and final prong of the Lemon test is that there is no undue entanglement with the government. Due to the nature of this grant, which is a one-time grant, there's no maintenance needed by the government, and being since this grant only happens once, there's no undue entanglement. Additionally, in the standard created in Augustine v. Harlan, it's also called the Augustine test, in which the effect and purpose of the grant is not to help the religion. It's already been explained through the Lemon test, in which the purpose of this is not to aid religion, and the effect and its primary effect especially will not.
Counselor, if I may interject for a moment, you say that there's no entanglement of religion, but when the state decides whether this grant should be awarded, they have to inspect the church's mission to make sure, in fact, this is a secular playground and not some sort of proselytizing, paradise. I mean, isn't there something there that the state would have to inspect itself, and don't we want to avoid that sort of entanglement?
Thank you. And what we see is actually there's a great quote from Justice Clarence Thomas on the case of Mitchell v. Helms, in which he states that, quote, if the religious, irreligious, and a-religious are all alike eligible for government aid, no one would conclude that any indoctrination that any particular recipient conducts has been done at the behest of the government. And so what we see is that the government in and of itself won't be looked at as endorsing this religion or creating an undue entanglement with it, because it's a simple one-time grant of not even the playground structure, but rather the surfacing to ensure that kids are safe while they're playing on the playground.
You proceed, Counselor.
Furthermore, we see that the denial of the scrap tire material grant to the Learning Center, an established nonprofit organization, not only would not be a violation of the Establishment Clause to grant the church the grant, but rather, based on this is the sole reason of denial for the grant was their religion. We see that it violates the Learning Center's equal protection rights. Though under the US v. Caroline Products footnote 4, Lutheranism is not a discrete or insular minority, we look at the logic behind equal protection cases to ensure that groups and classes are not discriminated against. And we see that groups such as the Learning Center should not be discriminated against based off of their sole religious affiliation. Further,
Counselor, if you can you separate for me, if you will, your free exercise claim? Is it the bell?
sorry.
It's okay. If you could you please separate for me your free exercise claim from your equal protection claim? It seems that these arguments are somewhat similar.
Of course. Yes, so what we see in the equal protection claim is that we're looking at the standard of strict scrutiny and compelling, and under that, compelling state interest in the fairly tailored standard, both of which the Missouri Department of Natural Resources fails. While in the equal protection argument, we're looking at the standard of neutrality under Smith and Lacoupe, and furthermore, we're looking at viewpoint discrimination under Rosenberg, Good News Club, and Lynch.
Tell me more about Rosenberg. Oh, I'm sorry, Julie. I'm sorry, Justice Silver. Can we proceed?
You ask your question first, and then I'll ask a follow-up.
My question was explain how Rosenberg applies in this case.
Thank you. And while there is not a free speech violation in the case now presented before the church, the cases of Rosenberger, Landshopper, and Good News Club discuss that public resources can not be discriminatory in allocation against religious organizations with religious affiliation. And so, while there is no there is no free speech claim, what we see is that the logic behind these cases of preventing religious organizations to be discriminated against in terms of allocation of public resources and access to public resources, and that's where we see that the statements under Rosenberger, Good News Club, and Lamb's Chapel are applicable to this case.
Counsel, let me ask you, Yeah, does the government have a compelling state interest in not violating the Establishment Clause?
Yes, the government could argue that there's a compelling state interest in two main areas. First, that there's an Establishment Clause or a lack of Establishment Clause violation. And second, we saw that the Missouri Department of Natural Resources discussed Article 1, Section 7 of their state constitution. Under the Establishment Clause compelling state interest, we see that it is non-existent, as granting the Trinity Lutheran Church recycled scrap tire material would not violate the Establishment Clause, and therefore there is no compelling state interest in denying the Trinity Lutheran Church based off of an Establishment Clause claim. But on the second claim, we also see that while the Missouri State Constitution discusses the direct or indirect aid to churches, it also discusses that there shall not be discrimination against churches, which the Missouri Department of Natural Resources is in direct violation of with their current policy regarding the scrap tire material grant.
And the reason we draw that conclusion is that they are deciding to discriminate between religious and non-religious. They're taking this as a blanket ban and deciding that if they discriminate against all religions, then that's no longer discrimination, although we disagree, and believe that this is a blanket ban and that the court should acknowledge that they are now in violation.
Okay.
And so furthermore, on this Equal Protection Clause case, or this claim, we see that since we examine this under strict scrutiny as the government's policy, using the compelling state interest test and furthering that with the narrowly tailored standard in Grutter v. Bullinger, we see that since the state does not have a state interest in denying the grant to the Learning Center, we see that the interest cannot be narrowly tailored. But furthermore, we also see that there's a free exercise violation against the Learning Center. Under the standards of Smith and
Counselor, if I can interject, isn't there a risk here though that if we tell the state that they're required to these religious organizations that not to give any grants to anyone, and then no one would get any tire scraps? I mean, isn't that the potential fallout of this case? They'll choose to simply drop this program altogether rather than entangle themselves in these religious questions.
Well, when we're requesting these grants, we're requesting that they acknowledge that they're giving these grants on secular purposes. We do not want them to acknowledge the fact that they are a part of a religious institution. So therefore,
Counsel, if I may, but do we know that these are secular purposes? Is there anything in the record about whether, prayers are said on the slide and, people pray the rosary on the seesaw? I mean, do we have anything in the record about this?
Well, being as the grant is only for the resurfacing of the ground of the playground, the grant would not influence the actual content of the playground. Therefore, there'd still be no entanglement.
Okay, you proceed.
So under the standard of Smith and Lacooni's neutrality test, in that government laws must be neutral and generally applicable, we see that the blatant blanket ban on all funding towards religious organizations in the grant is in violation of the neutrality standard, because the neutrality standard doesn't simply state that you can be equally discriminatory towards all religions, but rather argues that you have to be neutral in discrimination between religious and non-religious organizations. But furthermore, we also see that there is a viewpoint discriminatory argument in the Free Exercise Clause claim, because we see that the allocation of public resources based off of religious affiliation or non-religious affiliation is blatant discrimination in where they are going to be allocating the funds based off of a belief of the organization.
But Counselor, you mentioned for a moment the Employment Division versus Smith case. Isn't this a neutral program? Isn't this simply a neutral application law? It's not singling out Hindus, it's not singling out Christians. It applies equally to all groups. Why would this be a violation of the Smith principle?
Thank you. What we see in the Smith principle is not that it's like equally discriminatory between one religious group and another. It's rather that it has to be neutral between religious and a-religious organizations.
Very good. Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you. So furthermore, on the viewpoint discrimination claim, though as I mentioned before, there is no free speech violation in the Trinity Lutheran Church v. Pauley case, we see that the standards of Rosenberger, Lamb's Chapel, and Good News Club are all applicable because the basic logic behind these cases is that access to public resources should not depend on one's religious beliefs and religious association. And so under the standards of both Smith and the Rosenberger.
Counselor, you have about a minute left if you want to wrap up and provide a summary, please.
Okay, thank you.
In conclusion, we ask that the court rules that the denial of this grant is to the Learning Center on the sole basis of religion is not a violation. It's unconstitutional. Additionally, there is no violation of the Establishment Clause, as well as blatant discrimination under the Equal Protection Clause and preemption.
Moreover, the court should rule that a blatant blanket ban to all religious organizations receiving the grant violates the neutrality standards of both Smith and the community. And at the end of the day, this is the question of the safety of the playground, the safety of children, and the safety of the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Your thing's beeping right now, so you're right on target.
Thank you.
A respondent for the respondent council, please take the podium. And whenever you're ready to begin.
May it please the court that my partner and I, as representatives of the respondent poorly, are here today to answer the question of whether a government agency funding a playground associated with the church violates the establishment clause of the First Amendment. Our belief is that the Missouri Department of Natural Resources, or DNR, decision to deny the Trinity.
Counselor?
Yeah.
Can I ask you to speak up just a little bit? It's a little bit difficult to hear you.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Was constitutional and not in violation of the establishment of free exercise clause of the First Amendment. Is that better? The volume.
It's a little rough, but it's better. Try and speak as loud as you can. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. The facts of the case are that in 1985, the Trinity Lutheran Church became associated with a preschool called the Learning Center, integrating religious instruction into daily activities. The Missouri Department of Natural Resources is a government agency that offers grants to preschools in the form of the TIRE program. The Learning Center, by extension, the Trinity Lutheran Church applied for this grant, which the DNR later denied, citing Article 1, Section 7 of the Missouri Constitution, which states, no money shall be taken from public treasury directly or indirectly in aid of any church, section, or denomination of religion. As we can see, the ruling and decision of the DNR does not, using the Lemon test, you can see that this violates the Lemon test. For the first prong, it has some significant secular purpose. The DNR made a decision in an effort to stay neutral. If they gave the money to the Learning Center, they would have to give money to everyone in order to stay neutral, and it would give a significant secular purpose in that effort. And in the second prong, it does not. It does have a primary effect of advancing an activity of religion. Again, in an effort to stay neutral, they do would either won't give money to the Trinity Lutheran Church, or they would.
Counselor, if I can interject, you mentioned a moment ago, primary effect is to advance religion. Your friends on the other side said the effect is not primary, but maybe secondary or tertiary. Respond to that.
even if the effect was tertiary, but we just agreed that it was primary, it is still a byproduct of the playground that children and students could be converted to religious.
And as stated before, we can guarantee that religious doctrines and beliefs won't be integrated into the playground. And through using that, that would be a clear promotion of the religion in our continue. And when we help build the playground using the grant money, it would clearly attract new people, because having an attractive playground, if a child is going to decide whether or not they want to go to this preschool or another preschool, having a pretty playground is definitely a deciding factor for that, and ultimately the family. So when a family is making that decision.
Counselor, let me press you on that. I mean, do you really think that when a parent is deciding on where to send their student to school, that their primary focus is whether or not there's a nice playground?
I think
or is it more that they're focused on the educational quality? I mean, you just said it's a deciding factor. Convince me that it is a deciding factor.
I think it's a reasonable assumption to make that the parents looking for several schools for their children will try to pick the one we could get and then make this resources for the children. I don't think that's an unreasonable.
And when something looks nicer than something else, it's reasonable to come to the conclusion that there's better teaching, overall better experience, and it really can make a deciding factor.
Now your friends on the other side note that this playground would also be open to the general public. So you don't have to send, if you live in this neighborhood, right, you do not have to send your child to this school in order to make use of the playground, correct?
Yes, that's correct. All of this playground would still be used by the children attending the school on a daily basis. And we would like to point out that the Missouri DNR cannot lawfully give this because they are not appropriate and practical safeguards guaranteeing that the playground won't be used as part of the daily religious activity. You can see the case of commitment to public education versus and religious liberty versus nice. This case dissolves a law that would allow religious funding from the state. A quote from the held decision from this case is that the New York statute violates the establishment laws because their inevitable effect is to subsidize and fund the religious mission of state because there would be there's no guarantee that there would not be religious practice on this playground, and there is no way for the state to create regulations around it or to try to enforce them. If the state was to send an agent on the weekly basis to go see if the children were reciting the Tyanin on the day on the slide, that creates an excessive entanglement between the state and the church.
And through using another.
So, Counselor, if I may interject and ask a question. Actually, could we try something? I'm going to pause the clock for 5 seconds.
Okay.
Could you just put your microphone on mute and leave it on mute for a few seconds and maybe let the feedback settle? Garrett, if you see the
I'm not sure I know how. Yeah. We'll try and figure it out.
click over the thing, there's a microphone. Just click that for a few seconds.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to put you on mute right now. Okay. So the feedback is gone. Julie, your feedback's gone?
Yeah.
Is that good?
I'm going to. No. I didn't say unmute. No, you stay mute. Okay. Because it's very difficult here. I'm going to. For a second, okay? Okay. Now only I'm speaking. Okay. Now I'm going to unmute as we go. Don't worry, I paused your time. You're not going to lose any time, I promise. Okay, mute your microphone. Okay, and try talking.
Okay, is that better?
Yes, that's quite good. All right.
And a test. Okay.
Okay.
And
Yes. Unmute your microphone.
It's unmuted.
No, I know. Julie, Justice Silverberg. Okay.
It's unmuted.
Okay. All right, Counselor, proceed. I'll restart your clock. You have 8 minutes left.
Okay. Thank you. An address that we feel is more appropriate for this Trinity Lutheran Church, the Poly, is the endorsement test proposed by Justice O'Connor in the Lynch v. Donnelly case. It's specifically about determining whether a government's actions amount to an endorsement of a religion, thus violating the Establishment Clause. According to Justice O'Connor, a government's actions is in violation if it creates the perception in the mind of a reasonable observer that the government is endorsing. By this standard, if the DNR is to give and the learning center, it would be in violation because a reasonable observer would see the government providing the resources and the funds for that playground over one preschool over another. And any reasonable person who didn't necessarily know all the intricacies of this case and what this grant had would put the connection that the government seems to be endorsing Trinity Lutheran Church over any other church.
Proceed.
The government also has the liberty to decide where they would like to put their funds. This was established in Locke v. Davies,
Which, where the court upheld when a student who decided to go into theology as their major was not able, applied for a scholarship or was denied that because of his decision to go into theology. Which our friends have recently argued that the government, if withholding of money from a certain religion, is in violation, and whereas this case clearly establishes that the government is allowed to choose where their money goes, and if it, regardless of whether or not someone is a certain religion, and this applies to Trinity.
Counselor, can I interrupt you though? Can you respond to petitioners' claim that this is both a violation of their free exercise rights as well as an equal protection violation?
So I would like to first respond to the argument that this is an equal protection claim. I would like to read the Equal Protection Clause, and it states, "No state shall deny to any person within its jurisdiction." However, I would like to point out that the Trinity Lutheran Church is not a person. It is an institution, and so does not fall under the jurisdiction of the Equal Protection Clause.
But Counselor, certainly the members of the church have free exercise rights, and they're exercising it together as part of the church.
Yes, but we're looking at the question of whether there is an Establishment Clause violation if there is money given to the church and the playgrounds associated with it.
And what's important to remember is not having this money from the grant and having a nicer looking playground is not going to inhibit the people within the church in any way.
It's not going to inhibit their ability to continue their religion.
Well, doesn't it though? I mean, what if people have kids and they go to church and their kids want to go play on Sunday during prayer services? They're going to go crack their skull on the playground. That's not safe.
No. But then we're back to the question on whether they would be practicing religious activities on the playgrounds. If people go to church and this grant was given to the playground, they are free to practice however they like within the church, however not on the playground.
Okay, you may proceed, Counselor.
So further along with the endorsement test is there any reasonable observer and person The argument is that there is no, by the standard, if the DNR was to give the money to church, it would clearly be a violation of the endorsement, and it would be a lot. And any reason that would. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Any reason that you would on and see this action as the government endorsing this religion. I would like to read a quote from the Virginia Statute of Religious Freedom. This outlines the idea of separation of church and state. So first, the separation of church and state comes from one of the framers of the Constitution and one of the founding fathers, Jefferson.
Whoa. Hold on. Did you say Thomas Jefferson was a framer of the Constitution?
He was one of the founding fathers.
Okay, was he there at the Constitutional Convention of 1787?
No, he wasn't at the Constitutional Convention.
Okay, very good. Proceed.
In which it says, our civil rights have no dependence on our religious opinions any more than our opinions on physics or geometry. In this, that the founding fathers and other framers of the Constitution thought that the church and state should stay separate. There should be no entanglement, and giving this money would make an entanglement.
Counselor, you mentioned Jefferson. You have 2 minutes left. Maybe you can tell us a little bit what Madison had to say about this topic.
Madison was one of the framers of the Constitution. He also saw the separation of church and state as an important, as written in the Establishment Clause of the Constitution. A lot of the founding fathers, when writing the Constitution, the framers of the Constitution, looked to Europe and looked to the religious prosecution that was happening, and did not want America. So they created the Establishment Clause so that there wouldn't be an entanglement between them.
And what's important in this is that
So you have about 45 seconds left, if I may interrupt. You have about 45 seconds left. If you'd like to wrap up, you may.
okay. There's not an establishment or free exercise clause violation here. The government cannot fund this playground just because it's only a playground. And by that reasoning, the church is just a building. A church could be just a building, and what's stopping the state from having to build churches? This issue is something that the state tries to stop with their adamantly against the mixing of church and state. And the government is at no obligation to distribute these funds to the churches.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. 3, 2, 1. And your time is up. All right. If the petitioners can return to the podium, please. You'll have 5 minutes rebuttal time.
Okay, thank you.
Whenever you're ready, you may begin.
Thank you. So in this speech, we are going to be discussing a couple of the respondents' arguments in their first oral argument. First, we will be addressing the arguments about the founders and framers. Second, the equal protection claim. And then third, the Lemon test. Fourth, Lynch v. Donnelly. And then fifth, the case of Locke v. Davey. That being said, first addressing their argument against equal protection, they state that the Learning Center is not a prison. However, not only are the people who attend the Learning Center are people, but furthermore, if by using that logic, the government would be able to ban organizations such as like the NAACP because they are not people in and of themselves. we see that it goes against the argument of the Equal Protection Clause and the intention of the Equal Protection Clause if we simply allow these bans on organizations because the organizations themselves are not people. Then addressing their argument against the framers and founders, they discuss Thomas Jefferson. However, the founders and framers of the Constitution, though respecting the separation between church and state, did so because they wanted to respect the state. In the case here presented before the court, there is not an impediment of sovereignty upon the state nor on the church. Therefore, framers.
Counselor, if I can interrupt you, I asked your friend a minute ago about Madison's views on this topic. What are some things that Madison discussed with respect to religious liberty?
Madison states, and I quote, "We maintain, therefore, that in matters of religion, no man's right is abridged by the institution of civil society, and that religion is only belongs." And so what we see is that Madison the division between church and division between church and that it would be a violation of the free exercise clause, and so that there is religion, which we see in the case here presented, before.
Now moving on to the whole idea that the respondents quoted that to give everyone, they have to give everyone in order to. The fact that
Hey, Counselor, if we can speak up a little bit.
The feedback is really bad. Can you lower the microphone a little bit on your the volume on your computer?
Yes. One more.
Sorry, we're trying to do the best we can with this. It's not perfect.
No worries.
Just getting a lot of feedback from hearing.
Is that better?
Yes, we can hear you twice. It's because it's
yeah, we can hear ourselves twice too.
Yeah, we can hear ourselves. Probably.
Can you hear us though?
Sorry.
You can hear us.
Very faintly.
Okay.
You're doing a good job then.
Just slightly. Okay, can you hear us?
Yes. Can you hear
me? Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry.
All right. You have about 2 minutes left if you want to resume.
So once again, no, the neutrality would easily be filled simply by a solely secular purpose. Again, this would not enhance or inhibit the religion as it is solely a playground, and the content of the playground is not going to be changed, therefore not drawing more people to the
Also, they talk about like how the playground will be prettier. However, as we see, we're simply changing the ground at which the playground stands on in order to ensure that kids are not harmed by the quote sharp and protruding edges.
If I can, let me ask you, what if instead of funding scraps for the floor, instead the state was funding, I don't know, science textbooks or math textbooks, right, for religious school? How do you think that case would shake out?
Under the standard of Mitchell v. Helms, so long as the grant is, quote, secular, neutral, and non-ideological, the state would be completely justified in doing so, and it wouldn't be a violation of the Establishment Clause.
Okay, and you have a minute left if you want to think about wrapping up.
Furthermore, addressing the endorsement claim that they have in Lynch, we see that this directly conflicts with Justice Thomas's quote in Mitchell v. Helms, in which he states about how if the government is giving it all equally, it would not be an endorsement. And also on their case about Nyquist, we see that this is different because in Nyquist, all or practically all of the schools that were qualified were Roman Catholic churches, giving the impression that it was a sectarian grant. However, we see that if we are looking at this from a neutrality standard, it would not give such opinion.
Lastly, in Locke, this case easily does not fulfill the Lemon test, therefore it is irrelevant to this case, and the standard of that does not apply.
Also, in Locke v. Davy, it wasn't a question of whether Davy could exercise his rights. He was able to, for instance, the Washington Promise Scholarship enabled students to attend religious institutions, even take courses in theology. They specifically could not attend.
Council, time's up.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
back to the respondents. You now have 5 minutes for rebuttal time. And if you can hear us, you're ready to begin whenever you can.
Okay, can you just turn it up a little bit? It's very good. Yes.
We appreciate your flexibility with the technology. It's not ideal, but the best we can do.
Okay. Sorry. Okay.
So from what the petitioners are proposing, they're suggesting that building this playground is just building a playground. And however, with that logic, you can quickly suggest that building a church is just building a building, when clearly that would be a violation of the endorsement.
Counselor, let me interrupt you for a second, and I'm going to speak up so you can hear me. What you just said suggests to me that the state couldn't even grant a building permit to a church, right? Is that what you're arguing?
No, that's not at all what we're arguing. We're arguing that the same logic they use, that this is just a playground and has no effect, is the same logic that someone could use to say a church is just a building. Why isn't the state paying for churches to be built? Because they are just buildings.
Okay.
Right, but Counselor, you have to concede there's a difference between ground and a church, right? I mean, I realize you're trying to draw a comparison, but this is not a program designed to give money to build churches or build buildings. It's merely to help kids not crack their skulls open. Right? Why can't we draw the line here?
Because once again, I would like to reaffirm the point that there are no safeguards against the playgrounds being used in their daily religious activities.
And through giving funds to build this playground, we could quickly lose a lot of authority that we originally had to be able to withhold funds from any church. Because if we start funding a playground here, what's to say another church would be like, hey, we need our playground to be funded too. Why can't we have that as well?
Well, what's the problem with that? Why can't you fund playgrounds and keep playgrounds safe for kids so they don't break their skulls open? Right? Why is that? Why is that problematic here?
Again, that's
to remember is that there's daily religious activities taking place within the preschool, and it's less about the playground in its state right now. If children are still playing on it, it obviously is not that huge of a danger to those children.
But Counselor, this is a playground, not a playground, right? You said it yourself. They're praying inside and they're playing outside, right? So what's the problem here?
But once again, there's no safeguards against a teacher possibly on a sunny day reading Bible study while the kids sit on the nice new hired ground. There's no safeguards against the children reciting the Ten Commandments or Hail Mary on the playground.
And in case of that, sorry. And I suppose in case of rapture, they're covered.
Yeah. I would like to correct the statement from my opponent earlier about the equal protection clause. Once again, I would like to pose the significance of an originalist reading of the Constitution that does say no state shall deny any person within its jurisdiction. This is an institution and not a person. Therefore, it doesn't fall under the jurisdiction of the equal protection clause.
And another point that the petitioner, that my friends made.
I'm sorry, I want to go back to that. Do you have support for that proposition that the Equal Protection Clause applies only narrowly to individual persons and not to groups of persons?
No, that's just an originalist reading of the Constitution.
But it's an originalist reading based on what?
If you just look at the text in its original form.
Okay, so you don't have history.
So I think, Counsel, your argument is the text of the 14th Amendment says persons, it doesn't say institutions. Is that the argument, basically?
Yeah.
Okay, proceed.
Okay, I know. I think my co-counselor is alluding. It's a lot of case law over the last 150 years suggesting to the contrary, but proceed. You have about 30 seconds left, and you can.
So they suggested that the sole reason that the grant was denied was based off of that religion, when a lot more goes into it than that, and most of it was in effort to stay neutral. And an interpretation they brought up of Lockheed Davy was that because of this religion he was denied, when in reality, no. What they said was.
Okay, Council, your time is up. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I'd like to thank both of the teams who participated today. An absolutely amazing job. If it seems like we're asking you tough questions, it's because you all did so well and you prepared so well for these arguments. So please, you should commend yourselves. I often have questions about the future of a republic when I do these sorts of debates, and I see how committed you are to studying the Constitution. It gives me faith and gives me hope. So I'm grateful for this. We will be announcing the winners probably later today. Scores. In fact, you have another round coming up in a few minutes. We will end this call and call you right back to start another one in about maybe 5 minutes or so. So we have a chance to take a brief break. Justice Silverbrook, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I just want to commend both teams for a job well done. Again, when we're asking a lot of questions and really pushing you on particular legal or historical points, it's because we think that you have the analytical ability to be able to respond to them in kind. I think generally you did a really good job at replying to all of our questions. You should be very proud for how far you came. We had more submissions this year than we've had in any other year. So even getting to the semifinal round is quite an accomplishment. So you should pat yourselves on the back. And again, we will look forward to announcing whether or not one of the teams who argued today will be proceeding to the final round. So congratulations again.
Thank you very much. This is Josh Blackman signing off, and we'll start another round in a minute. Thank you very much.